Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 12 of Cautious Coffee, and today we're talking about money, 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 money.
Money.
Austin, what's up, man? How are you?
And I am doing good. It's again weird. This is our second straight episode of not recording in person, but I don't mind it. I mean, we don't have to deal with like weather, commuting, packing up and setting up gear. I mean, it's not the worst. The only thing is it looks kind of weird when we record two episodes back to back and we're wearing the same thing, but you know, it's all good. But other than that, I'm doing great. Had a great 4th of July weekend and looking forward to a vacation here coming up soon. Going to Hilton Head, I believe, next week when you're listening to this podcast.
I've heard
everything on your end, man.
Really good things about Hilton Head.
I've never been.
I've never been either. Maybe I should start looking into it. Everything on my end is going incredible. My son is here visiting for about 5 weeks, so we're spending a lot of time in the gym and using it as a classroom to embrace the struggle.
Well, I've seen some of the pictures that you've been posting, and I think it's probably got to be the most fit and dedicated in the gym father-son duo. So hats off to you. And also, I know that the movie selections that you guys have been watching, Independence Day, great choice.
Absolutely. I mean, he must know the classics. He blew my mind the other day when I mentioned Beyonce and Jay-Z, and he says, "Who are they?"
No way. Are you sure he's your son?
Right. My son is 12 years old, does not know who Beyonce and Jay-Z are.
I think he just doesn't know pop culture, because I would like to think that 12-year-olds now at least have heard of them. I mean, because they're still relevant now. I mean, Beyonce's still one of the, it's not like she hasn't been producing music for the last like 10 to 15 years. I mean, she's still putting out platinum records.
So yes, my son doesn't care about pop culture. He can tell you all about Minecraft. He can tell you all about, the
working on the brain.
Marvel world. Yes, he can tell you about books. I just bought him. He just read Ender's Game. He's reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We got all those books in each of those series. He read The Alchemist since he's been here. So he's a
smart kid.
Yeah, I mean, he's at least a reader. So
that's good.
I love that, and I'm just trying to get him pumped up in the gym, and I will be teaching him how money works, because when I was a kid,
I had no idea.
Yep. My dad didn't teach me anything about money. I'm still learning things about money that I wish I would have known, and I think about, well, where would I be if I had known these things much earlier? So, Austin, what do you know about money, man?
I know more than I know when I was 18. More than I know when I was 21, 22. I think, financial literacy and just the basics, something that should be taught in high school, right? I mean, you learn about macroeconomics, investing, and, maybe AP courses, you learn how to write a check, that kind of thing. Do you learn anything about credit scores? No. Do you understand about, debt and how it can impact you long-term? Do you learn about, just paying the minimum balance on credit cards? Like, no. Sometimes you got to learn the hard way. And, for me, I had a credit card. I think it was like a Capital One card or something like that. $500 credit limit. Got it in college. I was so excited. First credit card. It's on my own name. And I was like, this is great. I didn't even know about like points or anything like that. I just thought it was cool that I didn't have to use a debit card everywhere. And I think I maxed it out. And my first job at Louisiana Tech, 22 years old, probably making $10.61 a month. Couldn't really afford to live anywhere. And I think after paying all the bills, I think I had $75 worth of food. And food, I had to use $75 for like food, gas, and other expenses for an entire month.
Is this 1,000?
2011.
Yeah, $1,071 a month.
$1,061. I think rent was like $425. Student loans, all that stuff. It was just next to impossible. Yeah. But I mean, it was below minimum wage.
Yeah.
With that said, I was like, oh well, I don't have any money in my bank account. Like literally, I would have under $100 in my bank account, and I was like, but I've got a credit card. So I'll just put it on the credit card and, went over the limit, would make the minimum payment of like $25, whatever that is.
Yeah. Didn't
understand that I was compounding interest, paying interest of, $500 a month at 27%, and then 27% the next month. And ultimately, I got phone calls from, collections or whatever, and just decided to block those numbers, not pick them up. And then next thing you know is 2011 probably, and get a letter saying they want their money.
Yeah.
And that was when you had to take things seriously. So I was definitely concerned with credit cards at the time, financial situation, and it really kind of changed my perspective on everything. And I think, since that point, I've gone from, probably credit score that was below 585, 550, like really, really shit score, to now something over 800, and knowing everything about credit cards, how to capitalize them on them and leverage them.
Right.
So I think that's kind of my financial journey. Everything else in terms of like stock markets, I get the stock markets a little bit, of course, GME, AMC to the moon, Dogecoin to the moon.
Yes.
But in terms of like assets, like, how to leverage property and things like that.
Those are real assets, property versus anything in the stock market. Which is,
I would say I'm naive on that side. And I know you're quite the opposite. I mean, I know you've got a few different pieces of property that you own, rent out. So, I mean, you've taken a little bit of a different path.
Well, I mean, we started very similar. I also had a $500 credit card limit in college, and
don't get $500 credit card limits in college. That's our advice. Or if you do, at least know about credit cards.
That's how they get you. And the history of credit cards is very interesting. I think Bank of America did some sort of experiment out in Fresno, California, and they just sent out, these credit cards to people. They lost a whole lot of money, but they made it up eventually, right? All the interest that eventually compounded on all those different accounts.
Yep.
So interesting how all that came about, but definitely did very similar thing. Ended up, going over the limit, not paying the minimum something or other. I mean, I was in college. I didn't know any better. I don't think my dad had a credit card. Yeah. Did your parents have credit cards? Well, this is coming from a kid who didn't know black people lived in houses.
Damn.
Until I was like a junior in college.
Yeah. So I think my parents had like a Exxon gas card, but I think they had the cards. But they weren't like, savvy with it on points. I mean, even still to this day, they don't have, like a Amex Platinum where they can get travel credits or things like that.
Yeah. Back in the day, how would people go about getting money or paying for things that, were expensive? Banks, you go to the bank and say, hey, bank, I need money to buy a car or a washer or a house. And then they had very, I don't know, qualitative ways. This seems like a nice person. Let me call a couple references and see, what they think about him. And you were talking about credit scores. So there wasn't a credit score type of system where they, quantify your risk.
It's like a pawn shop, right? Level. I mean, you got a nice watch. They know they can take the watch if you don't pay up. Or we used layaway, Walmart layaway.
Yes, I grew up on layaway too, boy. Christmas time, go get everything off layaway. Yes, I know about some layaway. Do they even still have that?
I would imagine so.
Is that even a thing?
I would imagine so, because I've seen stories of like celebrities. Who was it? Tyler Perry, like in Atlanta, would go to Walmart and pay off like someone's layaway. I mean, it still exists, but fortunately, neither one of us are in that position today.
Well, thinking about the 60s and the way they allowed people to get loans for things, it wasn't quantitative. It was, and you think about, well, who are these people at the bank? These people at the bank are white men. So where do black people get money to go buy things, right? So, that could be another story. But if we're talking about money and the wealth gap that exists in this country, well, I mean, if you're doing it in that type of way, well, if a black person comes into the bank and needs to borrow money, probably wouldn't get that loan. So they wouldn't have access to certain things that other folks would have access to in order to build wealth. And that's kind of a pretty basic way you go about building wealth in this country.
So I think we have maybe differing viewpoints, right? I mean, you're very focused on, I wouldn't say differing viewpoints, just different paths, I
Yes.
guess. There are some people out there that value experiences and feel that they get rewarded from things like that. I mean, you look at like millennials right now. I think there's several surveys out there that have shown that millennials would rather travel than save.
Yeah.
And
They don't watch TV either.
yeah, and I don't know. I think for me, I'd rather get on a plane and go somewhere, have an experience. Definitely want to keep saving and growing. I've got the 401k and the investments, but it's, sometimes I would say that I'm under the mindset of like, I look back to, here's a good story, 2012, 2013, when I was like first living in the Houston area. There was a townhome that I was interested in
Yes.
living in.
Should have bought it.
And yeah, it was in now what is like a huge upcoming area, like Rice Military, if you're familiar with
Yes.
Houston. Home was listed at like 315, 325, something like that. It was like 4 stories, very good on square footage. And I had like roommates that I could have, they could sublease it, from me. 5 years later, that house I think sold for 600,000. I can't even imagine like what it would be worth today. But like that's one of those things that I look back on in 2013, 2012, whenever that time period was, and think, man, what if I would have done this? But I think it was more of being almost afraid to take on that risk and that investment. I think part of that for me is I felt like I couldn't make that decision because I still had, student debt, student loans.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of my thought is like, all right, no, I've got to pay off these, student loans before I can even think about, a house or something like that.
Yeah.
And again, this is coming 3 years off after, the credit card issues. So I think that part of that kind of weighed into that decision at the time. But I think maybe that's not the best way to think about it.
So my first job before I joined the military, I was a banker. And I learned that student loans are a common debt, as folks would, some of the older bankers would kind of school me and tell me what they were looking for when they're going to approve people for loans. I mean, you have a college degree, you're likely going to make more money over the long term, of your career. You're probably going to be more than likely good for it. So student loans shouldn't have been an issue. And anyone who does have student loans, there may be like lawyers or doctors who have like ridiculous amounts of student loans, but they probably make a ridiculous amount of money, or I hope they do, unless they kind of, gave up and went into the public sector. That can be a struggle. But if you work in the public sector long enough, I think there's some loan forgiveness benefits that you can take advantage of.
Yeah.
But back to you, 2012-13. I bought my first house in 2013, sight unseen, while I was in Afghanistan. And my only regret about buying that house, and actually it was yesterday, was the 8th. It's been 8 years. I closed on that house 8 years ago yesterday. I still have
2 weeks prior when you were listening to this podcast.
So I still own that house. So my philosophy, if you would have bought that house in Rice Military, was just to hold on to it, because that's your net worth. Every mortgage payment you make, you're increasing your net worth. You write off the interest on that loan. That makes so much sense to me. And if you decide to move, you rent it out. And someone else pays that mortgage, and you leverage it. Leverage is not 1 + 1 = 2. Leverage is 1 + 1 = 3. And that's what you get to do. So you want to take those trips?
You still can.
You still can. You have an asset.
How did you go about learning about this? Because this isn't something that we're taught in high school.
Yeah.
It's not something that we're taught in college.
Yep.
How did you go from that person that had that $500 credit limit and maxing it out to someone that is knowledgeable on this subject? Like what did you read? Did you learn? Did you talk to people? I mean, what was that like?
So I would say the 2 most influential books on how I view money. Money is a tool, right? Getting money is a game. It's like a Monopoly game.
I am very good at Monopoly, by the way.
Hey, then you have the right mindset. Would be Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, and there's a book by Warren Buffett, pretty much any book by Warren Buffett, and you'll get the tenets of money and how it works and how it's a tool and how it's not something like if you save all your money, you're doing the wrong thing. Like if you don't invest your money, right? What's the rate of inflation on a yearly basis, right? It varies, right? From 2 to like 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
So if all your money's sitting in a bank account, well, it's worth 2 to 5% less than it was a year ago. That doesn't make sense. So I want to park my money somewhere where it's going to grow faster than the rate of inflation. It's not hard. It's simple arithmetic. It's just kind of how we feel about money, how intuitively, it's that the money into the mattress or in the shoebox type of mentality.
That's why it's important to have, 401k, because that can grow significantly.
Absolutely.
Even the high yield savings account is something that's important because what is it? A lot of the banks, like if you do a Bank of America or Chase savings account, like at best you're getting like 0.01%, 0.03, something like that. But you can get some of the high yields, I think, go up to like 1.5%. I mean, you're getting, maybe it's not that high, but it's significantly higher than a standard.
It's still not as good as the rate of inflation. So what you have is you have something called the money illusion. And say you get a raise, you get a yearly raise around, Q1, end of Q1, beginning of Q2. You got a raise. And what is that raise? How much is it? Typically 3 to 4%, about the rate of inflation.
Yeah. Cost of living. Yeah.
So you didn't really get a raise. All right. It's just the value of money. Quick question. Do you know how money is created? Where does it come from? Who's doing it? Was it a stork delivering money, bags of money to?
It's a printer. Like if you run out of money, why can't you just print more? I mean, that makes sense, right?
So there's only about 90% of money lives in a ledger somewhere. There's only like 3% of money that out there that's like physical cash. Every time a bank makes a loan, they create a new money. That's how money's created. Central bank lends money to other banks or to people, right? You go to buy that house. Well, they didn't count out the money.
So are the banks a Ponzi scheme?
I can't go so far to say that it's a Ponzi scheme, but there's a system in place, and money is a very interesting tool. Debt is a very interesting tool, right? There is more debt. More debt exists than equity in the world, and you can leverage debt, right? If you were talking about 27%, or you had a friend who was paying a ridiculous amount of money. So in my mind, I'm just thinking, well, I need to get into an instrument that pays less, that I have to pay less interest on. Right?
Yeah.
I want to cheapen the amount of money I'm paying for that money.
It's interesting you say that because I have another friend. DeRae is referring to a friend that I have right now. I don't know if we told the story on air or off air. He's going through some debt issues right now with credit cards, but I have another friend that had, some issues when he lost his job a few years ago.
Yes.
And he was actually smart about it. He found a credit card. Like he knew that he could pay off his card probably within like a year's time or something like that. Or when he found a job, whichever came first. Yeah. But he knew that he couldn't afford that 27% APR. Mm-hmm. But he also couldn't afford to pay off his entire, I guess the moving expenses that he had incurred, car expenses that he had incurred. He knew that he couldn't afford to do that right away. So he found a solution, and I love this. There are some credit cards out there that allow you to do interest-free payments for up to like 12 months or 18 months.
Hell yeah.
And so he ended up getting that credit card.
Free money.
He ended up getting that credit card, paying off the credit card with that credit card that had like the 27% APR.
Yep.
So that balance went down to zero.
Yep.
And then he was able to use the zero interest, pay that off over 18 months and not having to pay an interest rate. And then of course he did it. And so that was like such a savage move. And it was something that, heck, if I would have known that when I was, 22, when I had that Capital One card, game changer. But I had no clue. And I was afraid to even ask
Or just
for
in
help
general, right? Just in
first.
general, as we go through life and we're looking for ways to make an investment in something or acquire something, like there is a way. It's a game. It's a game. Like there are so many, like competition, capitalism and competition.
Yeah.
These credit card companies, these banks, these credit unions. Like you got to
Yeah.
look, you got to dig. You can't be scared of this stuff. You have to read the fine print. That's it.
100%. And nobody reads the fine print. Nobody.
Read
Nobody
the fine
does that.
print. But you know, most Americans, they use credit cards to, you know, kind of bridge those gaps when there's shortfalls. So
They use it as an emergency fund.
it becomes problematic. And
Yeah.
then, you know, they kind of, there's a domino effect and it rolls downhill, and then they lose a job and they can't pay that stuff back. And then, you know, they're struggling.
And I think Dave Ramsey gives, solid financial advice for
Yeah.
people that are trying to recover. But one of his pillars is never, ever use credit cards.
Yeah.
It's so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you have to be informed on how to use credit cards, because there's so many benefits that you can get. Like I have a credit card that I pay $550 a year for just to use.
Hey,
and
I have two of them.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had lunch with my grandmother a few weeks back, and I think I told her to, we were talking about credit cards and points, and I was like, you know how many credit cards I have? I was like, I think I have like 8, 9, something like that. I can only carry 3 in my wallet.
Yep.
And I'm okay paying higher annual fee because I know I'm going to get like an ROI on it, whether it's travel, whether it's points. I was able to, for one of my credit cards, there's like a $100 Best Buy, spend 100, get 100 back, $100 at Home Depot, spend 100, get 100 back. There's the points, the value of that. Like I just got another United credit card because they had 150,000 point sign up bonus.
Wow.
Like, why would I not, do that? Because I know that would pay for a, business class trip to Asia, which if you were to pay for would be what, 6-7 grand. And so I know that there is value in
you're
that.
not paying the minimum payment on those cards though, right?
No,
you're not
exactly.
carrying a balance.
That's the thing.
That is the game changer.
That's the thing.
You can't
because when
carry a balance.
Exactly.
It's a debit card. It's a debit card.
Exactly. And that's actually one of the good things about the, Amex compared to other credit cards is Amex is not a credit card. It's a charge card.
Yep. You gotta pay that bad boy off.
Yeah, you have to pay it off each month. And that's the mindset that I take with all of the other credit cards too. Because it's not worth that 27% or whatever that APR is. It's not worth that high number. But if you pay it off every month, you build your credit score and you get a better, loan rate when you go to get a car or a house or things like that. And so it's really important. But that's where I disagree with, Dave Ramsey, because I do know some people that live and breathe by that and will only use debit cards. And that is so dangerous. Even from a security perspective, that's dangerous because if your debit card gets hacked, stolen, swiped, you're out of that money right away. Well, I mean, that money leaves your bank.
Robert Kiyosaki says that he uses debt to build wealth. So we're talking about, I want to use other people's money to add value somewhere, to a customer, to a network of people, something, a business. The debt market is exponentially larger than the capital market. There's nothing wrong with debt. You can't be scared of it. You just have to know how it works.
So why don't we talk about financial literacy like high school? Is it to set people back and to separate the haves and the have-nots, the people that have parents that were informed versus people that have parents that are not informed? I mean, why is this something that we just don't talk about? Because everyone I speak to recognizes that this needs to happen, but it hasn't changed. And, since I can remember, and now in college athletics, for example, there's the name, image, and likeness, which is completely changed. So college athletes can now capitalize on their personal brand. And you've got people that are going to be getting paid, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Rightfully
and
so.
It's not because they're an athlete. It's because, they know how to use social media and they have a huge following. Like there's a gymnast at LSU, her name's Livy Dunn. She's 18 years old. She's got like 4 million TikTok followers, several 100,000 Instagram followers. Like she's probably going to be the first $1 million college athlete.
Yeah.
And granted, she comes from, a privileged situation. And so she probably is going to have the right people in her ear, telling her what to do with investments and how to save things. And we see this all the time with, someone like Rob Gronkowski, who only lives off of like endorsement money and puts his, NFL contract in the bank or in the stock market and just lets it grow. But in sports, we see what is it, 70% of athletes go broke within 5 years of retirement. And so now we're going to have this issue with college athletes and getting into a windfall of money. Some of them come from extremely poor backgrounds. They weren't taught how to deal with finances and stuff like that in high school or even college. So I see this as not only a problem in college athletics, but for, Gen Z in general. Like, even our generation, like, we didn't learn about this stuff in college. I mean, at least I didn't. I didn't learn about it in high school either, and I took all AP classes. So.
Yeah, let's add it to the list of things that we wish we would have known or wish that we would have learned.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. I think there could be something to that, they don't, I hate saying that, they don't want us to know that, but who's they, right? I think it's something that necessarily wasn't considered, and it needs to be revisited because, we had an episode on education.
Yeah.
And we talked about how useless some of that stuff is. And there's other stuff that is much more useful, but it doesn't evolve fast enough to kind of keep up. Even the stuff that our parents teach us, it isn't necessarily relevant to the present, right? They have those past 100%. Experiences, and it was a different world then. And, just like with my son, like the world that I grew up in is going to be different than the world he's growing up in. And I need to be cognizant of that. I need to be aware of that. We have an episode about self-awareness that all goes into it as well, not having such hubris to think that I have all the answers, but to understand that there's a way to make it better. It goes
into continual learning.
Absolutely. But that's still some stuff that you should learn. You should know like how money works, that I shouldn't necessarily leave it in a savings account. I shouldn't leave it under the mattress.
One of the coolest money stories that I heard is one of my friends who just retired last year. He had been working for this company for 30 plus years. And I think starting on day one, he would take 20% of his income and put it in 401k every year. Mm-hmm. So he just lived off of, that 80% of whatever his salary was. So 20% went into 401k. And then plus it was matched up to like 7%.
Yeah.
Do that for 35 years, retiring at the age of 55, 56.
Yeah. There are a lot of ways to do it. That's the cool thing. That is the cool thing about it. The thing about that is being able to scale whatever your skill set is, whatever you're good at, understand how money works, be able to do as much work as you would normally do, just like if we were podcasters full time. And we had
when we are podcasters
full time and have the following of Joe Rogan. That's scalable, right? Because he's reaching millions of people doing the same amount of work that we're doing. He probably does a little more work, but you know what I'm saying?
Actually, if we get to the point where we're doing Joe Rogan, we're going to have like a team, right? And so we will do more work in some areas, but then areas such as like editing, spending that time doing like show notes and things like that, like we'll be able to allocate that time somewhere else.
Yeah. But you understand what I'm saying? Just that scalability is super important. And like, we didn't learn anything about that. Your parents didn't teach you like how to scale your skills. So you're like exponentially more valuable, and there's just an exponential upside to whatever the hell it is you're doing, because you're taking that into consideration instead of just saying, I want to go work for 35 years and put all this money into a 401k. That is one way to do it. Lots of ways.
It's not the only way.
There's
multiple ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
So
I've never skinned a cat before, by the way.
I haven't either. Actually, no, we did science class, biology, terrifying. I hated it.
Nor are we, disclaimer, we are not financial professionals. So.
No, we should have probably put that at the top of the show instead of 30 minutes in.
It's in there. It's in there. That's all that matters.
We'll put it in the show notes. But speaking of that, I actually think YouTube is a great source for a lot of this knowledge. There's a YouTube channel, Stephan, real estate guy.
Yeah.
He lives out in Los Angeles or Las Vegas now, but used to live in LA, and he actually worked for the Oppenheim Group, which is part of Selling Sunset, if you've seen that Netflix documentary. But the guy is like probably our age, maybe a little bit younger. He didn't go to college.
Yeah. Don't need it.
No, he started doing real estate when he was 18,
Mm-hmm.
and now, he's very transparent about his like net worth and how he's grown, and a lot of it's through like investment properties and stock market. I mean, he's built up the reputation
Mm-hmm.
where Kevin O'Leary from like Shark Tank will sit down and have a conversation with him on CNBC. I
Yeah.
mean, it's that kind of thing. And what I like about it is he talks about financial literacy in I think a way that the younger generation can understand.
Yeah.
Which is something that's so important and something that you don't see in the traditional classroom. And
Yep.
so, granted, you have to take things like YouTube and things that you see on social media with a grain of salt.
Yep.
I think they can provide a great resource.
Yep.
And plus, from a monetization perspective, I mean, he makes multi-million dollars a year from his YouTube channel. And that's because YouTube actually knows that businesses and brands want to be associated with those financial literacy versus, just the shock TV, the shock videos that you see on YouTube. So, I mean, businesses understand that that's where their dollar goes the furthest. From a CPM perspective, at least.
Our economy is based on consumption, right? If it weren't for consumption, going out and buying that nice new Rodecaster or monitor or planner, whatever. I think it's like 80 or 85% of our economy is driven by consumption. So not knowing the implications of that, really drives you to keep consuming. Credit cards keep driving you to keep consuming. I love that you mentioned the financial literacy piece. I want my son to I'm going to hand him the property of, the keys to a property, when he's 18. Just say, here you go. Make it work, grow it, right? Leverage it. And that's something that I wish, my father had given me or was able to give me instead of just, go and work hard. Like work hard, go to work your job, have that active stream of income, and a lot of the struggles out here are just from, you're playing the wrong game. So that financial literacy piece, right? Going onto YouTube, you have access. Everyone has one of these. All right. You have one. You can go and be like, hey, what was that guy's name?
Stephan.
Graham
We'll link
Stephan.
to it in the show notes below. He's actually got a podcast as well.
Let me listen to his podcast and watch his YouTube channel.
Watch his YouTube channel. The podcast is all right. It's got a co-host that doesn't really know what's going on. But
judgy.
They've got more listeners than us, so that's kudos to them.
Yeah.
I also look back. We'll be wrapping up this show shortly, but I look back to 2020 and the initial shock of COVID-19. The markets basically crashing. I know some people that got out of the markets so early on in the pandemic because they thought, we were going to have like another great recession, that everything was just going to crash and go to zero. And they pulled out of the markets on like March 18th, March 19th. Yeah. Terrible decision. I remember we discussed this in our group thread, and most of our group thread was like, no, if you can afford it,
go in.
Now's the time to buy.
Yes.
Buy the dip. Mm-hmm. And we have one guy who was like, look, we gotta take everything out. Yeah. That's a smart thing for us to do right now. And I understand maybe if you have that perspective, if you're retiring or about to retire, the fear of the unknown. But if you're in your late 20s, early 30s, buy the dip. I mean, know that the market is going to come back. I mean, you've got to look at it as a long-term game. Like on average, the stock market goes up 7% a year, but it fluctuates. Sometimes it might be 2%, 3%. Other times it might be 14, 15%. 7 years is average, or 7% is been the average for over 100 years. Just keep that in mind. Don't make those rash decisions. Seek counsel. I mean, I think that's important because there's always someone out there that knows more or smarter than you, and just accept that.
Yes. Don't take it as the gospel though. There are, lots of ways to go about doing it. Same thing with buying a house. There are people that don't own any securities whatsoever in the stock market. I happen to have a very high tolerance for risk. So, when everyone's screaming and running for the hills, I'm going to see what's going on, and I'm buying whatever's in the way. You know.
Well, that's why you and I, made multi-million dollars with AMC, GameStop, Dogecoin.
Those are
I'm just kidding.
Those are
Not true.
those meme stocks. No, but there's so much value to be gained, right? If you look at
Right.
those stocks and see where they dip to, right? Where they dip to, if you had gotten in them, and where they are now, you just increased your net worth a ridiculous amount. Like that was such a great opportunity, right? But people are so risk averse. They don't understand how money works. They don't have context. They don't follow history to understand that, hey, it's going to come back. It's not gloom and doom.
Yeah, part of the. I mean, I look at like Dogecoin, for example. I had a friend that was like, this is like last year. He was like, I'm just going to put $1,000 in Dogecoin.
Yeah.
And if I lose it, I lose it. He's like, I'm not gonna take it out unless it hits like $1 or something like that. And so many people, they would pour money into it and then sell at the wrong time, and then it would bounce back.
Yeah.
And it's, if you're going to deal with like a meme stock or something like that, like you've got to understand that it's a significant risk. There's a lot of upside, but there's a lot of downside, and you've just got to be willing to lose the money.
Huge gamble.
Yeah, that's all it is.
I would, it'd be a whole other episode talking about how the
gambling,
the stock market is, a lot of it is gambling, and how they build out those portfolios and do the risk assessments of those different securities. So, it was good on him to say, if I lose it, I lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're 38 minutes into this episode of the podcast. Episode, what is it, 12-ish? 12? Yeah. Yep. So you want to send us home? Any parting words, any parting thoughts?
Don't be afraid of debt. Go watch that YouTube channel, that Stephan. We are not financial professionals. We're trying to figure it out like everyone else. But we're thinking about this with reason and logic, and doing what makes sense for us. And I still encourage Austin to buy a house. There's not a bad time.
Working on it.
Thinking about a mortgage over 30 years. That's a long time.
Yeah. My parting advice is it's okay to not know everything, right? We've said this before, but everyone comes from a different place. I think Anthony said that, talking about like allyship, so it doesn't matter where you are on your journey, as long as you're wanting to learn and grow, that's good. Same thing with like finance. It doesn't matter what you know or what you knew. Be willing to learn, to grow, and know that, there's not one right strategy that's out there for everybody. And just, know that it's, we don't want to encourage mistakes, but know that you can overcome, mistakes. Just because you think you're in a bad situation with a low credit score when you're 22, 23 years old, like you can rebuild that. You just gotta do your research and try to get rid of those bad habits. But that's my takeaway.
Not mad at it. I like it. Good place to end. Hey, great job, Austin, looking at the camera today, man. I did a very poor job. So all you folks out there, we welcome your feedback. If we got anything wrong, please let us know. We
probably got a lot wrong.
Well, I won't go so far as to say that, but if we did,
some things wrong.
We definitely would like to have those conversations, right? Because we're not above being wrong. We're not infallible. We're just a couple of human cats out here trying to, podcast remotely this time. So, until next time.
We'll see you. Take care, everyone.